Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I am Zach Reed. I am joined tonight by JMic at JMic Check. We are running it back with the 2024 Dynasty Dummies rookie Hootenanny running back show part 2. We're giving you the second 6 running backs. The difficulties have been so technical you wouldn't even understand them, but we're here. We're fighting through it. We're going to give you the best show we possibly can. So, JMic, I appreciate seeing your beautiful face. How are you this evening?
My brother, I'll tell you what, these technical difficulties are got my computer and things running about as fast as Audrey Estime. So we'll see how the evening goes. But I'm grateful to be here with you. We are working through it. May sound a little different from coming through your earballs via podcast or even on YouTube. But if you're checking us out, thank you again. It's always fun to be with you. And it's crazy just how quickly this time goes, Zach, where now this is week number 4, second group of running backs that we'll get to discuss this evening. And I think before we even get into it, I think it's probably prudent just for us to be able to at least mention, hey, free agency has happened or is happening. So much of the landscape has changed. Zach, not that we're a place that people are going to come to get their breaking news on free agents and things of that nature, but I know without a shadow of a doubt, something's got your attention, and I would love to hear it.
So it's funny. This is a perfect segue. It's almost like you did this on purpose, but within the last 2 days, Kirk Cousins has moved to the Falcons. Minshew has moved to the Raiders. Darnold has moved to the Vikings. Brissett has moved to the Commanders. Trubisky to the Bills. Locke to the Giants. Winston to the Browns. Russell Wilson to the Steelers. Flacco to the Colts. Rudolph to the Titans. Tyrod Taylor to the Jets. Sam Howell to the Seahawks. Saquon's moved. DeAndre Swift has moved. Calvin Ridley has moved. We are full-blown free agency. It looks like a Madden franchise where people are moving around all over the place. And it brought me to this point where I think it's prudent to remind people, especially when we're talking about rookies, that situation is fluid. Situation is incredibly transient. It can change week to week within season, but we're seeing more and more things change year over year. You've got salary cap. The salary cap, while it isn't hard and fast, people call it fake. It's real-ish. And so you see people make cuts and move money around and get signing bonuses and prorate that money out. So people move that way. You've seen the legal tampering period become this bastion of moves and blockbuster moves at this point. And also you're seeing more and more trades and that sort of thing. It's even up to the trade deadline, where back 10 years ago, the NFL trade deadline was a shrug. And now we're waiting with bated breath to see who or if people are going to move. So a reminder, because we're going to forget it in 4 or 5 weeks here when the NFL draft happens. We're going to forget that talent is what you should base your evaluation on. That should be the bedrock. Like, situation matters, but it doesn't matter nearly as much as we think it does. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, it doesn't matter as much as we think it does. And so the foundation, the bedrock of your evaluation ought to be talent. Don't get too caught up in the trappings of situation.
Zach, I feel attacked. Clyde Edwards-Helaire mentioned. Man, I thought he'd be so good. He was so fun in college. No, but I love that. I love the greater point, because when we think about how often, especially in today's NFL, even different from a handful of years ago, things are changing at just an alarming rate. Not just how the game is actually played, but even how the game is played in the non-point scoring season by actual NFL franchises. I think that it is key to keep in mind we are, or the work that we're doing, and the resources that we're leveraging to help folks understand what we're seeing, and obviously other pieces of the puzzle that they're putting together on their own is vital in understanding what we can be leaning on going forward. So I'm excited about that, Zach. Excited for the good word. And I'm excited to be able to talk the next 6 running backs here. Now, again, everyone, we're not going based off of any specific order. We grabbed some names that actually were somewhat buzzy from the NFL Combine, some names that of players who were kind of next up for a lot of folks, and even some names that came out and surprised us in terms of rounding out this top 12 of folks that we're going over for the first 12. And again, for those that may be new to the program, we're going to be talking through part 2 of running backs here. And what we'll do is when we get to the end, we'll talk through our film grades. And these are essentially how we had these players graded based off of what they did on film. So these aren't necessarily rankings when we're looking at landing spot and all of these things with pro days and everything else happening. We're just trying to give you an understanding of what we see on the film, and we're excited to be able to get to it. That's it. The 6 fellas that we'll be talking about this evening. Ramon, yes, you can call me Ray Davis, out of Kentucky via Temple, or Vanderbilt via Temple, by way of. We've got Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. That would be Southern California. Sorry, Gamecocks fans. You had him and messed that up. We've also got Jaylen Wright out of Tennessee. We have Isaac Guerendo out of Louisville, who burned up the combine. And yes, as a Kentucky fan, it hurts my heart to have to talk about a Tennessee and a Louisville player all in the same evening. But hey, heavy is the head, they say. We've got Kimani Vidal. We've heard it all over the place in games, so it's been fun to watch. But out of Troy, and last but not least, we've got Cody Schrader out of Missouri, of Truman State fame in Division II. Zach, anything else we need to talk through, level set for as we get into this next 6?
No, just be aware that the 12 players that we are talking about in running backs are not necessarily our top 12. Again, JMic mentioned that it's buzzy names. It's names that we've seen talked about. It's names that we've seen pushed up in other people's either rankings or mock drafts or post combine hype. And so they're names that we felt we should talk about. And there will be probably a few others that we get to in the catch-all show.
Oh, yes.
And you will, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you will have your opportunity to class participation portion of the program where you say, hey, Zach, JMic, you guys missed Jalen McMillan. You need to talk about him. That's me. I'm putting that one in there. We need to talk about Jalen McMillan. But we're going to do that. We're going to do another episode next week where we do quarterbacks, tight ends, and then we're into the catch-all. So if we haven't talked about your pet player who's coming into this rookie class, we want to hear from you because we don't want to miss the next big thing. We don't want to overlook Puka Nacua. We talked about him last year, but we don't want to overlook Puka. We want to give everybody their due if we can get eyes on them. So these aren't the top 12, but these are the first 12.
There you have it. And with that and all of my UK bias, I can well up within me in this moment. We've got Ramon Davis, a.k.a. Ray Davis. And you talk about the road less traveled, Zach. This guy has been at the collegiate level for quite some time. First couple of seasons, he spent them at Temple, where his first season, he came onto the scene and was absolutely fantastic. And then life was really strange and weird because he ended up finding himself in 2021 at Vanderbilt. And then after 2 seasons at Vanderbilt, that second season in 2022, he went for 1,042 yards on 232 carries, scored 5 touchdowns, and had himself so much of a day in embarrassing the University of Kentucky Wildcats. The Wildcats said no more. You must play here. He transfers to UK and goes berserk. 199 carries, 1,129 yards, and 14, count them, 14 touchdowns. He's got 2 seasons under his belt, one at Vanderbilt and one at Kentucky, where he went over 20 receptions in the season, 29 receptions in 2022 at Vanderbilt, 33 receptions in 2023 at Kentucky. Zach, we're talking about a player who is finding the end zone, 21 total touchdowns in this final collegiate season. Let's talk some Ray Davis, and I will try to hold my bias down as best as I can.
10% off your meal at Outback Steakhouse. $100 onboard cruise credit. 5% off Best Western Hotels. A free medium popcorn at Regal Cinemas with the purchase of your movie ticket. There are tons of benefits to being a member of the AARP, although none of them seem particularly useful for an NFL running back who will turn 25 midway through his rookie season. Ramon Davis is well seasoned after playing 2 years at Temple, 2 seasons at Vanderbilt, and the final year for the Kentucky Wildcats. At 5'8", 211 pounds, Davis is very compact, and he uses this to his advantage by getting low, getting leverage, and churning his legs to move piles. He also runs with excellent patience, biding his time for an opening to appear, and then using that top end burst that he's got to get through and into open field. Perhaps, though, the most impressive part of Davis's profile is his versatility as a receiver. He can be split out wide, he can run routes from the wide receiver position, or he can leak out of the backfield and create coverage mismatches. He's got tremendous hands and will be a dangerous weapon as a pass catcher. I know we joked about this off air, but I keep seeing him and calling him Kenny Gain better. Like, as much as I loved Kenny Gainwell as a passer, he didn't have the ability as a runner. I think Ray Davis does a little bit of both.
And there's so much goodness to be had when we're thinking about Ray Davis, because he's got this. It's almost like an old man game in basketball. He's got the ability to take you down to the post and give you some power. He's got the ability to, oh snap, he's moving that quick, to shock you a little bit in that sense. He's moving piles. And then he's dynamic in the passing game. And when you're seeing him leak out in screens or in the flats, he's routinely able to make a guy miss and or put himself in a position to be able to leverage gains further down the field, or even falling forward for the extra 3-4 yards. Again, to do the best that I can in trying to temper my bias. And a lot of times we'll get on here every other year, Zach, and there's a Kentucky running back, and we laugh about it, we make jokes, and I try to clown a little bit. I feel like Ray Davis is legitimately the best running back that Kentucky's seen, I want to say, probably in the last decade. And essentially, it's always been a pretty good position at UK. And obviously, being a Kentucky fan and watching all of the games, he's one that I'm really excited to see his potential going forward, because of the versatility that he provides in such a compact body, and his ability, even in between the tackles, to be able to find, fit through, and burst through small crevices and small holes. I don't know that everyone in this class, and specifically folks in this group that we're about to talk with today, I don't think they can share the same things when we talk about that, at least not all of them. That said, Zach, he's not perfect. I know we have to rag on the Wildcat at least a little bit. So what do you have for us?
So the ugly side of Ray Davis's pass catching chops is that he is a terrible pass blocker. Now, there's some debate as to how much that matters for fantasy purposes, but there is absolutely no question that when he is asked to pass block, Davis will either bail out early, or he'll simply throw himself at a defender's feet and hope that he does enough to slow down that rush. Davis is also very deliberate, slow to the mesh point with the quarterback, opening himself up occasionally to being hit at or just after the handoff. And I also think that his decision-making behind the line of scrimmage can be deliberate at times. He gets caught trying to make a decision on inside runs where he'll like slow and then go. And by the time he starts going again, he gets hit. When Ray Davis does manage to get a breakaway run, his top speed, I think, is just not quite fast enough. So he gets caught from behind. He's got like chunk speed, but not necessarily breakaway speed. Ultimately, though, the pass catcher plus profile is one that we look for often. That player who profiles initially to have a receiving role, but also has the ability to take over a larger workload through injury or situations that arise over the course of an NFL season. Players like this tend to be of value in rookie drafts because they seem like they're incomplete players, when in reality, they are the opposite. And Ray Davis, to me, looks like one of those players. He is somebody that I am very interested in going after in that second round of rookie drafts this year.
Yeah, and so much of that indecision that you're talking about sometimes, Zach, was one of the more maddening pieces because there are so many examples where he can consistently find that space. And I think that that's one of the things I highlighted in the first round. And when he kind of does that aloof, kind of hanging out in the backfield as he's leveraging the mesh point, and even when he's looking for an area to be able to find a crease to run, there are just so many times where it's like, okay, that shouldn't have been +1 gain. Like we should have gotten more out of that. There should have been a case where you're not getting hit or you're not waiting to take on this contact. And I think some of that indecision, especially out of a guy who's a senior and has seen as much football as he has, it's not great, not great, and that is disheartening. But there are so many things to at least like about his game that allow you the upside to dream a little bit and be excited about what could be. All right. Enough of the Ramon Davis love. Let's come back down to earth a little bit, and we'll transition to talk about Marshawn Lloyd. We're going out west. Let's talk about those USC Trojans. And oddly enough, Marshawn Lloyd, 5'9", 220, actually started out at a different USC, University of South Carolina, for the first few years of his collegiate career. His best season was in 2022 with the Gamecocks, where he had 111 carries, 573 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. Transfers out to USC, joins the Caleb Williams Roadshow, and really, to a large degree, has a nice little breakout when you think about what he actually produced. 116 carries, which not a ton of work, but 820 yards, good for 7.1 yards per rush, 9 touchdowns. Unfortunately, does not give us the Zach Reed rule approved 20 catches in his collegiate career. The best season that he had from a receiving standpoint was 2022 at South Carolina, where he had 18 receptions and only 13 receptions in 2023 for the Trojans. Marshawn Lloyd showed well at the Combine, showed well at the Senior Bowl, where people were pretty excited about him. Zach, what are your thoughts on Marshawn Lloyd?
I think it may be telling of the quality of the 2024 running back class that arguably the best pure runner of the group never had more than 116 carries in his 3 years between South Carolina and USC. Marshawn Lloyd missed the entire 2020 season with an ACL injury. Lloyd is a crease runner. He doesn't need much space to get himself through the line of scrimmage, and he has an innate talent for getting small through the initial hole and popping out on the other side. Lloyd runs with both patience and vision inside, allowing his blockers time to do their work and then picking the best path through the line of scrimmage. And when Lloyd is presented with an opening, he is absolutely deadly with that burst of speed. And I also think Lloyd has fantastic feet in traffic. You talk about JMic, the picking your way through the garbage. He has great feet in traffic. He picks his way through unscathed, even when things aren't completely clean.
And that burst is his trump card, right? That burst that he's able to leverage consistently when finding space, it allows him to be able to break angles because while he's got obviously a good top speed, it's that initial burst when he's able to push out toward like a 45-degree angle toward the sideline. Consistently, you're seeing him routinely beat folks to the edge, which is one of the things that really has me excited about Lloyd because that then opens up his ability to be able to break off chunk gains. He runs with a good bit of power. We'll talk about a couple guys here in a little bit who often brace for contact, and he is not one of those folks who are bracing for contact. We've got some unashamed, unabashed runs toward contact at times, but really like what Marshawn Lloyd has to offer, even in the limited work that he did receive. That said, Zach, let's talk a little bit about maybe why he didn't become a superstar at South Carolina.
If Marshawn Lloyd was better in the passing game, I think he would be on the short list of running backs that are at the top of this class. However, he is pretty abysmal in pass protection. He flat out misses blocks. He's not comfortable or confident as a receiver. And I know that he had some plays in drills at the Senior Bowl, but watching multiple games over the course of his career, he fights with the ball rather than accepts the catch. You see a lot of drops, a lot of plays where he should have been able to catch the ball in space, transition to a runner and go, but he spends so much time trying to make the catch that the rest of that doesn't happen. And as great as Marshawn Lloyd's initial vision is, and you mentioned him being able to get those angles initially and use that burst, I think his secondary vision is lacking a little bit. He's often taken down by a defender that he should have avoided. And also in short areas, I think he lacks just a little bit of quickness, and he loses the one-on-one battles when a defender is able to get that quick penetration, and he's not able to adjust to that quite quick enough. But in the world of ever-increasing numbers of committee backfields, Marshawn Lloyd figures to have a role at some point, and I think sooner than later. His deficiencies in the passing game will cap his overall upside for fantasy. But, man, it really seems like Lloyd's compact build and his ability to get things done between the tackles bodes really well for his prospects as both an NFL player and a fantasy producer.
So much of what you said in terms of how the detractors of Marshawn Lloyd bear fruit in what I saw as well, Zach. I think that he's got really tight hips when he's changing direction at the line of scrimmage, because typically when he's out in space, that's when he's able to beat those angles and things of that nature, just really being able to leverage that speed, that acceleration that he has to do really fun things. But I think he's got really tight hips in terms of being able to change those directions. And when that happens, that often leads to some galloping stops that he has. And those galloping stops end up having him ricocheting into his blockers. So it's really nice, obviously, when you're leveraging that to be able to run through defenders. It's not so nice when you're consistently bouncing off of your own blockers like a pinball machine. When those cuts are not always tight, that tends to be problematic for Marshawn in terms of the gains that aren't really helpful for his production. And I do think that with his acceleration, and similar to what you were saying, Zach, I think his acceleration gets him out of jams that his lack of vision gets him into. I think that sometimes his deficiencies with his vision put him in positions where he has to be special athletically. And so I think that it's one of those really curious cases because there are a lot of things that you like to see in when you watch this film. I love the way that he is a mover and shaker and consistently shows off bursts that's just different. It's just different in this class. And so that's one of the things that really stand out for him. We'll see what happens as this process continues forward, though. All right. I've been told I'm contractually obligated, so I'm just here so I don't get fined as we talk about Jaylen Wright, running back, Tennessee. No, I won't be a hater. Jaylen Wright, Tennessee, running back. And listen, Jaylen Wright showed off when it came to the combine. 5'10", 210, speed merchant. A player who showed off his speed and really got on to a lot of folks' radar about how well he played, or excuse me, how well he performed at the combine. When really in actuality, his game also did a good bit of talking too. This past season at Tennessee was his best season, 1,013 yards, 137 carries. That's good for 7.4 yards per touch, 4 touchdowns, and 22 catches in the passing game for 141 yards receiving. Zach, Jaylen Wright is fast, fast, fast. What else can you tell us about him?
2 giraffes, a school bus, an oarfish, an average carry for Jaylen Wright during his junior year of high school. These are all about 30 feet or 10 yards long. Also, the NFL should start measuring down in distance by giraffes. You imagine that? It's second down and a half a giraffe after that carry off tackle by Saquon Barkley. I mean, let's get the rules committee on that for 2025. But in his 3 years at Tennessee, Jaylen Wright worked in a committee backfield. But he was very efficient with his touches. Wright has very good vision in traffic. He's able to cut, use contact balance, and pick through tight spaces, both on the interior, and has the ability to get outside the tackles. For my money, his initial burst of speed to and through the line is lightning quick. And once he's through the hole and in space, he has secondary acceleration that not all of the backs in this class have, that bring him up to full speed in a hurry. And all of these traits marry together perfectly to create chunk plays when Wright gets the space to operate.
Man, really like his cutting ability in space when he's actually out and going. And it's funny sometimes when he gets to running. I feel like it's almost this real herky-jerky, like someone trying to learn how to drive stick shift for the first time. That's so much of what I feel like I see from him. And it's not really the smoothest, and it doesn't always look the best. But when he's out in open space, he is breaking angles with, again, great speed that we very much found out in the combine, verified, solidified. I think there are some other fine things about his game, Zach, but nothing that really pushes me over the moon. Again, I think from a pass protection standpoint, I do think that he's able to throw his head in there off the top, so he's really give it effort in that sense. And again, the ability to be able to break off big plays is something that's fantastic when you're thinking about Jaylen Wright. I do think that there are other issues at the line of scrimmage, but we'll get to those things. Zach, what do you got?
Yeah, because Wright is a shade on the smaller side, his bell cow potential is severely limited. He absolutely lacks power, especially when it's an obvious run situation, like short yardage or at the goal line. Wright tends to run out a little forward also, kind of over his feet, and that leaves him susceptible to being tackled down around his ankles. And while his initial vision is fantastic, I think once a defender has contacted Wright, things get real squirrely real fast. He seems to abandon his plan and run haphazardly and with poor instincts. And although Wright is usable on screens and dump offs in the flat, I don't think he's going to command a lot of targets at the next level, which is too bad because once you get him in space, he's pretty dangerous. It's tempting to see the breakaway runs and the high yards per carry and hope that Jaylen Wright can co-opt more volume at the next level. But the reality is that efficiency rarely holds serve when the touches increase. People are going to look at him and they're going to hope for Devon Achane, or they're going to look at the like Lamar Miller when he had all of that efficiency but not the volume, and think that there's going to be more when the pie gets bigger. Wright feels like a running back without a true position. He's a home run hitter that isn't going to see the carries that he needs to truly be effective for fantasy football. At least I think.
You could say that two times fast when it comes to somebody else that we'll talk about. I think the again is I think at the line of scrimmage, you'll see him at times be able to leverage jump cuts, but he's also someone with the really choppy steps and with that herky jerky motion that he has. He is not always finding the space necessary to keep that efficiency, and I think that he lives that efficiency somewhat lives on that big playability, which obviously he has the ability to deliver. I think one of my issues is the inconsistency of how he's operating between the tackles is something that, as you said, Zach, I don't think that that's going to bode well for his ability to maintain or sustain any kind of long production that allows him to be the A side of any kind of committee. That said, speed's fun. And if someone's going to leverage him to be able to get him out in space, a lot of good things can happen with the way that he's kind of reckless abandon about how he goes about that. Now, another team that I don't necessarily want to talk about, but as I said before, I won't be a hater. We'll talk some Isaac Guerendo. I won't mention how Kentucky's beaten Louisville several times in a row. I won't talk about how Isaac Guerendo had to leave Wisconsin to get to Louisville to eventually lose to Kentucky in the manner that they did and have a really embarrassing close to the season. But what I will say is Isaac Guerendo went to the combine and showed his behind. We're talking about a guy who is 6 feet, 221 pounds, and moves like an absolute bat out of hell, as they say. The guy is fast. We're talking 4.3 fast. Again, for several years of his collegiate career was at Wisconsin, could never quite break through or maintain health or maintain status to be able to actually be on the field to share time with that of Braylon Allen. We got to 2022 and he had 64 attempts for 385 and 5 scores in Wisconsin. He was like, I got to do something different. The man transfers to Louisville. Poor choice. I won't get on him about that, but hey, worked out really well for him. 810 yards, 11 touchdowns, 22 catches for 234 yards, and a handful of plays where you absolutely see his speed be something that is absolutely deadly for the offense. Isaac Guerendo, Zac Guerendo.
Yeah, it took 4.33 seconds for Isaac Guerendo to put his name in the running back conversation surrounding the NFL draft. Guerendo's 40 time was the fastest for any running back at the combine, and it was tied for the third fastest overall, and he did it at 6 feet and 221 pounds. That sudden speed is evident on Guerendo's game film as well. He had very good bursts to the line of scrimmage, quickly attacking open holes. And when defenders don't square Guerendo up, he will blow through arm tackles. So he's not just a burner. He can run through when defenders hit him up around his chest with the arm tackles. But perhaps the biggest asset of Guerendo's game from an NFL perspective is his ability as a kick returner. He averaged 23 yards per return over the course of his collegiate career. Unfortunately, the NFL Rules Committee is trying to do away with kick returns year over year over year. So maybe a little bit of a non-starter there.
Zach, you mentioned, I think one of obviously his calling card, his cheat code is his speed. And as you mentioned, as he's able to break those arm tackles near the line of scrimmage, you see him really, again, breaking angles quickly when it comes to defenders when he's got open space. I think that once he's able to actually get to that open space, while I feel like often ends up bracing for contact, I do think that he is someone that is going to offer chunk plays that will leave people really wanting more to see him on a down-to-down basis. Zach, I don't have a ton to say great about Guerendo, and it's not because he's a Louisville Cardinal, but fact of the matter is, not sure how polished of an actual running back that he is. Go first. What do you have on Guerendo's drawbacks?
So there's no doubt that a quick look will give you the idea that Isaac Guerendo is a prototypical between the tackles grinder. But if you take a little bit longer inspection, that will show a definitive lack of power. And this wouldn't be a big deal, except that Guerendo is also not a creative problem solver. So instead of running as though he has a plan, he's far more reactive to the situation directly in front of him. And he doesn't set up defenders and string together multiple moves to make longer runs. It's, what's in front of me? And then if he beats that, it's okay, what's next? Instead of having the forethought and the ability to again, problem solve that run. Isaac Guerendo's speed grabbed our attention at the combine and probably turned a number of heads in NFL circles as well. But his outlook for fantasy feels more like a slow burn. It took me like 3.5 hours to get through enough film that I was satisfied. Guerendo probably gets on the field as a special teams player, but for me, it seems like he is a long shot to see significant touches that translate to fantasy points.
Yeah, Guerendo is the I don't even know the movie. I just know the GIF where the guy's screaming more, more. That people will leverage. It's like you want to see more of the big plays, but there's so much fizzes and putts and starts when it comes to his actual ability as a running back. His inability to be creative with his speed is, I think, one of the more detrimental pieces of what he's able to do, because if there was any sort of creativity, and as you mentioned, problem solving within his actual game, I think that he'd be a much more compelling prospect watch. Besides the lack of power, I think he's got, for all of that speed that he's got, I just hear the cartoon thing on loop, the sound effect where he's trying to actually make turns and his right arm gets to waving as he's trying to make turns at full speed, just because he doesn't have that dexterity or loose hips or loose ankles to be able to make those moves happen. And for as much as the speed, I think, will have people excited about him, and obviously the ability for big plays to take place, I think there's no refinement when it comes to the actual mechanics of vision, patience, elusivity, his ability to cut. Like, there's just not a lot to be excited about.
It's wild to me because I've seen at least one fairly high-level known analyst have Guerendo in their top 5 running backs for this class. So that speed is going to be a little bit of a siren song. It just is not. It's not enough for me.
And you know what's funny about that, Zach? I feel like every week I've had somebody in mind when I'm comp season, and it's not even about thinking about this, but I remember watching and thinking, oh, this really feels like a less physical version of Israel Abanikanda. I said, I've got Guerendo graded now. Let me go back and just look and see how I had Abanikanda graded. And I had Abanikanda graded just a little bit higher, but in the same areas, I saw the same general grades as Abanikanda. I just remember thinking so much of, man, Abanikanda can break loose and he does all these fun things, and it's fun to see him be able to do that. But I don't think he's a very good running back. Like, I think he braces for contact. I think that he's consistently kind of running up to the line and getting tackled by folks. I was really confused, but I just saw so much of that in Guerendo in watching him at Louisville. So lots of big plays, lots of things that, again, if he gets paired in a place that allows him to be creative and get him in space, you'll see his speed shine. And I think it'll be interesting to see if that works out for him. All right, 2 more players on the evening. This time we're going with Kimani Vidal, the Troy Trojan, who dominated the Sun Belt for the last 2 years. The man's played in an absurd amount of games over that time. We're looking at 48 games played for him in his 4 seasons at Troy. we are looking at 781 total carries in his collegiate career, Zach. In the last 2 seasons alone, we're talking over 520 carries in the last 2 seasons. Again, that season in 2022, 1,132 yards, 10 touchdowns on the ground. In this past season in 2023, 297 carries for 1,661 yards. My word. 14 touchdowns on the ground. Every season except for this last one when they gave him darn near 300 carries, we see over 20 catches per season for Vidal. Listen, we're talking about a player who did awesome things at Troy in the Sun Belt, and again, was a player who burst on the scene at the Senior Bowl and then went ahead and showed off again at the NFL Combine. Kimani called him Vidal. We heard all three of those things during games this season, Zach. Let's talk a little bit of Kimani.
Without looking, do you know where Troy University is located? Yeah, you guys see JMic knows. It was started as a teacher's college in 1887 in Troy, Alabama. But Kimani Vidal put it on the map with his performance in 2023. Vidal rolled up the second most rushing yards in all of college football, totaling 1,661 yards on 297 carries while tacking on the 14 touchdowns. Vidal is a bowling ball. He's 5'8", 213 pounds, and is a prime example of a crease runner. He doesn't need to have wide open spaces to succeed. Instead, he gets compact through the line of scrimmage and appears to simply show up on the other side. Vidal has excellent vision between the tackles, and he employs quick jump cuts when spaces get tight. In traffic, he also shortens up his stride, using choppy steps to allow him to cut sharply and also avoid being taken down by ankle tackles, because he's got the ability to kind of start and stop quickly. And if a defender fails to square up Vidal, he is able to absorb the hit, maintain his balance, and continue driving forward with that excellent contact balance.
Time and again, we're watching these small, short, choppy steps, particularly around the line of scrimmage, allowing him to be able to buy the time to probe, and make his move over and over again. I think that of this group that we're talking about, Zach, he's one of the more creative players in space, specifically when he's one-on-one with second-level defenders or third-level defenders. So we're talking corner safeties, any of those players. I think that I really like his opportunity to be able to get positive yardage in those instances. Again, he's leveraging patience consistently to be able to let blocks develop. I like the way that he's able to probe, and then attack. And his bounce through contact, as you previously mentioned, is very, very good. As we talk about Vidal, I do think it's important to note, it's funny when we watch him versus a lot of teams, obviously in the Sun Belt, versus when we saw him against, up there competition in Kansas State. And obviously we watched the offensive line just get bowled over and worked over in a major way, and he had no room to run. So Zach, if you would touch on a little bit how you gauge and how you navigate some of that, because I think that that's probably a really cool thing for our listeners to hear, as well as incorporating some of the things about Vidal's game that we're lacking in places.
Yeah, and it was interesting. The game against K-State, he ended up with like 84, 87 yards. Like, he had a couple big chunk runs, but he was bottled up for most of the game. Aside from having to climb out of the primordial ooze that is the Sun Belt Conference, Kimani Vidal has a few other marks on his profile. He's a very willing blocker, but he doesn't always understand what he needs to do to complete his assignment. He often misreads that and will end up double teaming an already blocked defender, while another blitzer that he should have identified gets a free release. Vidal also had 3 seasons with more than 20 receptions, but it feels like that number is a little bit of a false flag. I think he was used mostly on screens and checkdowns and little pop passes. And so I don't think that he's necessarily a high-level receiving prospect at the next level. He's adequate, but not somebody that I'm looking at that is a surefire 50 reception player. When he has to make a decision on the fly, Vidal sometimes gets bouncy. So I like when his steps get choppy, but sometimes it's his entire body that starts bouncing. And when he does that, he gets less explosive because now he's lost his leverage to plant and go. Kimani Vidal's combine performance answered some questions about the validity of his body of work in the Sun Belt. He had a great combine. He's athletic. You know that those numbers are like numbers that we can take and look at and say he's a good player. His draft capital will answer questions about the NFL's interest in him and his potential to earn opportunities. I think Vidal is far from a sure thing, but I get some major James Robinson vibes from his film. I think he's a really interesting name to monitor later on in your rookie drafts. That third round could be a prime Kimani Vidal spot.
Yeah. And Zach, it's interesting because for all of the touches that he was receiving in the passing game, it's funny that you mentioned because we didn't necessarily see him be weaponized in unique ways in the passing game. There's so much flats, so many screens, and he probably, I think, and as you said, exhibited at the combine the quickness that he's able to have, the explosiveness that he has when it comes to just being able to leverage in space and start stop. So I was curious why they wouldn't leverage him more to be able to take advantage of that with lower level linebackers, things of that nature at the second level. So I guess I have questions as to why they wouldn't do that. But all in all, aside from some of those marks against his pass protection, I do think that he's average to above average and even good, really good in some areas. Surprisingly high grade from me regarding Kimani Vidal, but we'll see what this shakes out when we finish up with our last player for the evening, one Cody Schrader. When we think about Cody Schrader, Zach, and I'm sure that you're going to tell the story far better than I can, but again, getting a look at him at Truman State when he is running away from everyone for very, very long touchdown runs, and then coming over to the SEC where many of those runs that would have been touchdowns at Truman State were 15-yard gains, and it was good. It was good. We'll take it. When we're thinking about Cody Schrader, again, out of Missouri, 5'8", 202 pounds. Again, we're talking about a senior-laden group today. The only junior that we've mentioned today would be Jaylen Wright. But Cody Schrader also, strange enough, finished 8th in the Heisman voting this year in 2023 and had an absolutely exceptional season for the Missouri Tigers. Again, after transferring from Truman State, he spent 2 seasons with the Tigers. And in this final season, bell cow status activated, 276 carries, 1,627 yards, 14 touchdowns. Sheesh. And again, we saw 19 receptions last season, Zach. And he was like, flirting with the rule. Let me go ahead and get this 22 this year. 22 catches for 191 yards. No touchdowns in the passing game, but you saw him be used plenty. Zach, Cody Schrader from Truman State, Division II, all the way up to finishing 8th in the Heisman voting. We got to talk some Cody Schrader.
Cody Schrader's college career began in 1945 during the Truman administration. No, hold on, I got my notes wrong. Cody Schrader's college career began at Truman State College in 2018. After 3 pedestrian years there, this is a really strange career, he exploded in 2021, leading all of Division II in rushing, 2,074 yards, and 2,288 yards from scrimmage. You flash forward 2 years, and this past season, Cody Schrader is at it again, setting the Missouri single-season rushing record, leading the SEC in rushing, and finishing with the third most rushing yards in all of college football. It's impossible to roll up as many yards on the ground as Schrader has amassed without fighting for every extra inch. And he is absolutely an effort player. His legs do not stop churning until he's finally on the ground. At 5'8", 207 pounds, he's undersized, especially for a runner who excels between the tackles. But Schrader is far more adept running inside. I think pound for pound, Schrader is an excellent blocker as well. He picks up blitzes. He identifies where he needs to be. He pass blocks, and he will even get downfield to spring his teammates for extra yards on pass plays or quarterback runs. He also rounds out his skill set with the ability to pass catch, having put up 22 or more receptions in 4 of his 6 collegiate seasons. So, again, a nice player, has succeeded on multiple levels, but in odd ways.
Odd ways indeed. And it's really interesting because stylistically, Cody Schrader fits, I think, what a lot of NFL teams were doing with a lot of the zone concepts, because I think that's where he shined the most. One cut, downhill, no nonsense. Let me find a crease, and I'm going. One of the more efficient movers. He's not wasting a lot of time when he's got the ball in his hand. I think he exhibits diligence with his movements, but there's not much wasted. And I love the way you put that with calling him an effort player, because I think that he is exhibiting high effort. I don't know how much there is to show for that in some areas, which I think that we'll get to. I don't want to jump there exactly. I do think that when there's room to run, he's finding that space to be able to do so. Specifically when we're talking through, again, those zone concepts, when he's finding the holes in that sense, he's able to get downhill and make those things happen. And I do think that he has the vision and shines in those concepts. The actual physical ability to excel in it, specifically in tight spaces, I don't really know. Zach, as we close the evening, let's talk about some of the drawbacks on Mr. Schrader.
Perhaps Cody Schrader was listening to President Truman when he said, carry the battle to them. Don't let them bring it to you. Because I think a major red flag on Cody Schrader's game film is his willingness to initiate contact and how often that contact stops his progress. And in short yardage and goal line situations, Schrader needs to have exceptional blocking to succeed, because he doesn't have power enough to push the line. Like, he keeps his legs going, but he doesn't have enough behind it to really move things. I also think Schrader struggles to run off tackle and to the outside because his speed is limited. You talked about him getting caught. Plays that would have gone for 30 or 40 yards at Truman State are going for 10 or 15 at Missouri. I just don't think his top end speed is really where it's at. Schrader does a lot of things well. I think ultimately he profiles as a decent backup running back with the ability to stem the tide should opportunity arise. I think he may work himself into a third down role with his abilities as a blocker, but it's really difficult for me to envision a scenario where he becomes a true fantasy producer at the NFL level. But if he does, it won't be the first time that Cody Schrader has bucked the odds and succeeded.
Yeah, his elusiveness at all levels is just sorely lacking. And again, not going to be his calling card, but I think the other problem with that is if you're lacking in elusivity consistently, and you're also lacking with power and being able to truly break tackles and move piles, then I think that we're just left with a uninspired fantasy asset in that regard. There's so many times, and again, you mentioned it, Zach. There's so many times where we're watching his film, and he's stopped by the first defender that's putting their hands on him. He might fall forward for 1 or 2 more yards, but that first defender is getting him, whether that's at the first level or the second level. So if it's a defensive lineman or linebacker, if they're getting hands on him, momentum is stopped. I think that his contact balance is pretty average in that, and that if they get hands on him, he's going to eventually go down. And I think that he lacks the burst, even though he has the vision. And it's really interesting because I feel like if we put him and Marshawn Lloyd together, it would be really fun, because I think that Marshawn Lloyd has the burst and sometimes not the vision that helps. Cody Schrader, I think, sees the spaces to be able to get to them, but he's not able to squeeze through them in those congested areas. So when we're thinking through even the likes of stylistically what Oregon was trying to do with Bucky Irving, that's where we saw so much of Cody Schrader also do or try to do in Missouri's offense. They wanted to be able to create lanes, create space for him to do that, and you saw him excel at that. Anytime it was tight fits, gap scheme when it comes to blocking, there wasn't really anything good happening in those instances, and almost felt like it was just times where the Missouri offense was just wanting to keep the defense honest, because there wasn't much coming from it from a fruitful standpoint. That's Cody Schrader. I think that he did a lot of positive things, and obviously he had an incredible season. And his prospects going forward, I'm not the most excited about. But again, very good player, and I love the effort. And I think that the vision that he has, which is actually pretty good. I just wish there was more athletically to partner with it. All right, Zach. We've got 12 running backs that we've talked through over the last 2 weeks, which means we have 12 running backs to be able to talk through film grades for. If you want, you can start with the landscape of just these 6 players. If you want to put them in the entire landscape of the 12 that we've talked about thus far, you choose. We've been doing this long enough. I don't have to tell you how to do this. You're a grown man. You can wipe your own butt. Go ahead. Make it happen.
I do. I'm going to start with the 6 for today and say that Ramon Davis is a clear 1 out of these 6. I like Marshawn Lloyd as my 2. I think he's one of the better overall pure runners in the class. Kimani Vidal comes in 3rd in this group for me, which I was really surprised. We watched him because he had the good Senior Bowl and the good combine and a lot of buzz. That buzz, I think, is warranted. 4 is Cody Schrader for me, but it's really close between him and Jaylen Wright. And then Isaac Guerendo brings up the rear. If we're going overall, the 12 backs that we've talked, I think there's a real tight top 5. I think Blake Corum is my 1. Trey Benson is my 2. Ray Davis, Kentucky Wildcat at 3. Braylon Allen at 4. Jonathan Brooks at 5. But draft capital could change that considerably because I think he has the highest upside in the class. Bucky Irving is my 6. And this is another tier, but they're pretty close together. So Bucky Irving is 6. Marshawn Lloyd at 7. Kimani Vidal at 8. Cody Schrader is my 9th running back out of this group. Jaylen Wright comes in at 11 overall, but my 10th running back out of these 12. Audric Estime, and then at the bottom, Isaac Guerendo.
Very well, very well. As we get into this, I just think it's so fun how even though the scores are, I think, tightly packed for a good portion of this group, I think I've got about 8 of these players within 4 points, which is just like it's just strange for them to be that tightly compacted. But grades as they shook out regarding the first 6 of these the players that we've talked about today only. Surprise, surprise, Ray Davis is my top grade for this group. I've got Marshawn Lloyd nipping at his heels. Next up, I actually have Jaylen Wright as the next grade there. So number 3 on today. I have Kimani Vidal at RB4 in terms of today's group. Then I've got Cody Schrader bringing up the rear, right, nipping at his heels, Isaac Guerendo. Now, as far as all 12, my top 3 running backs all come from last week. Jonathan Brooks has my top grade, and Blake Corum is right behind him. There's actually a pretty precipitous fall to RB3 in terms of points. We talked about those 4 points. I've actually got 4 points between Blake Corum and who I have as my RB3, Bucky Irving. Coming from there, I've got Ray Davis as my 4, Marshawn Lloyd with the 5th best film grade for me. And then I've got Trey Benson at 6. Now, Ray Davis, Marshawn Lloyd, and Trey Benson, I've got them separated by 1 point.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. Audric Estime as right behind Trey Benson. Then I've got Jaylen Wright and Kimani Vidal. Vandalia Onions, whatever you want to call them. I've got Braylon Allen way further down than I thought that I would, but also as I watched, I was just super uninspired watching Braylon Allen. I know people have been excited, and I don't know that I highlighted it very well last week. It was an unenjoyable experience. Yeah. Not to say that he won't be awesome or be great for somebody, but man, as big as anyway, that's enough. Then Cody Schrader and Isaac Guerendo as 11 and 12. So that's it.
We really need to bring back John Fox to get the most out of Braylon Allen.
Could you imagine John Fox just living his best life with a thunder and thunder backfield of Stephen Davis and Braylon Allen, and just life is good for him. He would love life. All right, Zach, running backs from the books. Just like that. That's 24 prospects that we've talked about over the last 4 weeks. Next week, we get into quarterbacks and tight ends. In terms of who we'll talk through, I'm not sure. Something as I think about this on the fly, and as I know that you previewed and mentioned on the grind last night with our dear friend Peter Howard, we could talk through the first 4, which would be, I think, everybody that you said last night. So again, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and probably JJ McCarthy, which would be the 4 that I think everybody thinks are not like the others, right?
Yeah.
And then that would lead then into a catch-all that would probably include the likes of Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Spencer Rattler, because I think a lot of people were excited about what he showed out at the Senior Bowl. But as far as tight ends, we don't have the deepest of groups. So as we've told you all before, by the time we get to the catch-all, we really want to know who you want us to be watching. We know the Will Shipleys. We know the Javon Baker, who I am very excited about some Javon Baker.
Yep.
Ricky Pearsall. There's a lot of players that I feel like will make for one of our more intriguing catch-alls, and who knows if it's going to spawn into multiple catch-alls. But I'm excited to be able to continue with it, Zach. What is on your mind as we close out tonight?
I think it will spawn into multiple catch-alls. I don't think we can get away from it without doing multiple catch-alls. When you talk about the players that we haven't been through yet, and primarily receivers, but there are maybe a couple of running backs that we haven't gone through. We haven't gone through Shipley. We haven't talked about Frank Gore. So there are some players that we want to hit, but it's, again, the difference between what we're doing and what somebody like Peter Howard is doing with the metrics analysis with the numbers is he can take and scrape data from 250 players and plug it in, and the model says, okay, you need to look more deeply at these players. where for us to get into a point where we're like, we either need to keep going or not, we're watching 4 or 5 games before we're like, no, this was a bad idea. And so it's time consuming. I always talk about it. It's the guys who are doing the numbers are trawling. They've got the net behind them, and they're just hauling in a catch. And JMic and I are out here line fishing. We're watching one game at a time, and we're very fortunate when we can find games that are cut up to just an offense. So we're not having to go through and fast forward every 15 seconds, of a play. But we're trying to catch everybody. We'll try to watch as many of these players as you suggest. We're probably going to miss some players, but understand that we're doing it out of love, and we're having a lot of fun with it, and we appreciate you coming along with us, because it's way more fun if we can share it, if we can make it accessible, if people are enjoying and getting something out of it, and not just you and I, JMic, having a conversation and enjoying each other's company, but getting some more people involved. So I love these Hootenanny shows. I'm excited about the quarterbacks next week. I'm excited about the top end of that tight end class. Man, this has been a really good class. I'm excited.
Apparently, all sorts of breaking news as well as we've been recording as well, Zach. I don't want to throw you off here, and I know that we're not talking free agency, but apparently, all while we've been recording, Keenan Allen was traded. I don't know if you saw that, to the Bears.
Huh.
Yeah. So Caleb Williams has Keenan Allen. That's a good thing for him. And then the Kansas City Chiefs just signed one of their starting wide receivers, Marquise Hollywood Brown. Lands in Kansas City on a 1-year deal. So look, you can't say that we didn't bring you the breaking news here at the Dynasty Dummies, because it's what we're known for, obviously, is being on the cutting edge of the breaking news. Zach, I'm all out of nonsense. Let's call it.
I'm gonna need you to go back right now, listen to the 3-minute and 30-second mark where we talked about how things change all the time.
We told y'all. We told y'all.
We appreciate you if you were in the chat, if you were watching live. We appreciate you if you're listening on your podcast app. We love having you here. We love being able to do this. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for rolling with us. JMic at JMic on Twitter. I am at Tacit Assassin 13. The show is at Dynasty Dummies. This has been the Dynasty Dummies. Thank you for listening. Peace. Click.
Do it, Zach.